A reading from the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verse 1 through 19, verse 16. When he had said all this, Jesus went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to where there was a garden, into which he and his disciples entered. Judas, his betrayer, also knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas got a band of soldiers and guards from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and went there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, knowing everything that was going to happen to him, went out and said to them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered him, "Jesus the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am." Judas, his betrayer, was also with them. When he said to them, "I am," they turned away and fell to the ground. So he again asked them, "Who are you looking for?" They said to him, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus answered them, "I told you that I am. So if you are looking for me, let these men go." This was to fulfill what he had said, "I have not lost any of those you have given to me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. The slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into the scabbard. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father gave me?" So the band of soldiers, the tribune, and the Jewish guards seized Jesus, bound him, and brought him to Annas first. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had counseled the Jews that it was better that one man should die rather than the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Now the other disciple was known to the high priest, and he entered the courtyard of the high priest with Jesus. But Peter stood at the gate outside, so the other disciple, the acquaintance of the high priest, went out and spoke to the gatekeeper and brought Peter in. Then the maid who was the gatekeeper said to Peter, "You are not one of this man's disciples, are you?" Peter said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the guards were standing around a charcoal fire that they had made, because it was cold, and were warming themselves. Peter was also standing there keeping warm. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his doctrine. Jesus answered him, "I have spoken publicly in the world. I have always taught in a synagogue or in the temple area where all the Jews gathered. And in secret I have said nothing. Why ask me? Ask those who heard me when I said to them what I said to them. They know what I said." When he said this, one of the temple guards standing there struck Jesus and said, "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing there keeping warm, and they said to him, You are not one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the one whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it, and immediately the cock crowed. Then they brought Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. It was morning, and they themselves did not enter the praetorium in order not to be defiled, so that they could eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" They answered and said to him, "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." At this, Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews answered him, "We do not have the right to execute anyone," in order that the word of Jesus might be fulfilled, that he said, indicating the kind of death he would die. So Pilate went back into the praetorium and summoned Jesus and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Do you say this on your own, or have others told you about me?" Pilate answered, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom did belong to this world, my attendants would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not here." So Pilate said to him, "Then you are a king." Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" When he had said this, he again went out to the Jews and said to them, "I find no guilt in him, but you have a custom that I release one prisoner to you at Passover. Do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this one, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a revolutionary. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged, and the soldiers wove a crown out of thorns and placed it on his head and clothed him in a purple cloak. And they came to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him repeatedly. Once more Pilate went out and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you, so that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple cloak, and he said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the guards saw him, they cried, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this statement, he became even more afraid and went back into the praetorium and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" Jesus did not answer him. So Pilate said to him, "Do you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and I have power to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me, whatever, unless it were given you from above. This is why he who handed me over to you is guilty of the greater sin." This last saying that we read, "You would have no power over me whatever, unless it were given you from above. There is an oversimplified distinction that says that in the West, the Roman Church, that they think about Jesus as the victim. And in the East, they think about Jesus as the victor, as the one who conquers death. So that in the West, the cross is a thing of sorrow almost exclusively. And in the East, at least in the Byzantine tradition, it is a thing of victory, of triumph. And yet, in the Maronite church and in the Syriac tradition, maybe more so than any other tradition, we balance these two ideas. That Jesus is the lamb and the priest offering sacrifice. That Jesus is immortal and crucified for us. Holy God, Holy Mighty One, Holy Immortal One, crucified for us, have mercy on us. There was, by St. John Damascene, he had trouble with this expression. O immortal one, holy are you, O immortal one, crucified for us, have mercy on us. How can we think of this prayer Christologically? How can we talk about Christ being crucified and being immortal at the same time? How can we talk about Christ as the priest and also as the victim? How can we look at the sorrow of the cross and at the same time the victory of the cross? Now, I'll give you another example of this idea. So the Western tradition is the way of the cross, Darb Salib, Ziyah Salib, this procession of the cross. That it is something that focuses on the physical pain that Jesus endured. And then in the West, we have something like the benediction of the cross. Or on Friday, the adoration of the glorious cross. That the cross is a thing of glory. That the cross is a thing of beauty. That the cross is the tree of life, Noah's ark of salvation. That it is this thing of victory, Moses' staff that divides the sea, that it is the altar in the Holy of the Holies. And that Jesus willingly goes to the cross. And so there is this idea, I think, that while at the same time Jesus is hanging, supported from the cross, that his hands, are supporting the cross, that his hands are supporting his weight on the cross, that at the same time, all of eternity, all of creation, I'll say, all of creation, all of time, all of space are hung from those nails. That it is from those nails, the nails through Jesus' hands and Jesus' feet, not only upholding the cross, not only upholding Jerusalem, not only upholding the earth in 33 AD, but all the universe, all of space and time being held, being pinned to the love and mercy of God at that instant. Now, we would say that Jesus not only saves by his cross, he also saves by his incarnation. He saves in his miracles. But we can say, in analogy, that it was these few nails upholding all of creation. We can see in Jesus this great victory. And yet at the same time, we see his earthly suffering. But there is something, and I've probably talked about this before, maybe last year or the year before. There is, I would call it a heresy. There is a heresy, a wrong teaching that says that nobody on earth suffered physically as badly as Jesus Christ. That those hours on the cross, that is agony in the garden, that is scourging at the pillar, that these bruises and wounds that he bore for us were worse physical pain than anyone else had ever endured in all of eternity, in all of history. And I would say that this is a heresy. I would say that what the Romans did to Jesus would have been similar to what they did to others. And that modern science enriched torture can torture people for weeks and months and years. That there are people who have illnesses, people who have sufferings for years and years. And so I think it is belittling the crucifixion to say that his suffering was a greater physical suffering than anyone else in history. But where his suffering was greater was his emotional suffering and his spiritual suffering. Because this suffering was suffering from love. Imagine, if you would, that somebody hits you as a game. You say, "Oh, let's play a game where we're gonna hit each other on the cheek." So there's some physical pain that comes from that. Now imagine somebody hits you on the cheek, the same strength, but now it's an attack. And so you can see that that is more painful than just hitting as some kind of a strange game. Now imagine if the person that you love the most hits you. The pain is no longer a physical pain, but an emotional and a spiritual pain. And so when Jesus is crucified, he is crucified by people, each of whom he loves more than all of humanity has ever loved any other member of humanity combined. That Jesus loved his scourger, loved his hammerer, loved the guards, loved his betrayers, loved those who yelled, "Crucify me," loved those who said, "His blood be on us and our children," loved Pilate, loved Herod, loved Annas, loved Caiaphas, loved Peter. More than anyone has ever loved anyone, more than everyone combined has ever loved anyone. And so because of this love, there is immense suffering. But at the same time, because of this love, because this crucifixion was not only them crucifying him, but him offering himself, we see this same infinite love as healing, as triumphant, as transformative, as a victory. My friends, it was not the suffering of physical torture that saved us or that made the crucifixion horrible. Rather, it was primarily the love of Jesus Christ, who loved us even while we were crucifying him. Paul, he says that the cross is foolishness to the Greeks and a stumbling block to Jews, but to those who are called, to us, Jews and Greeks alike, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. That the cross, the foolishness of God, is wiser than human wisdom. And the weakness of the cross, the weakness of God, is stronger than human strength.